A little bit of time with the ibuprofen, about an hour, and closer to 2 actually. But I think I guess I can do this. It's not like I really have a choice. I have to do this. I have to live with this, and there's not really a choice. But yeah, my history is wholly and completely fucked up. Also, I recognize that the things that my grandmother did weren't normal. Actually, I realized that whenever I was a freaking teenager. Nobody else had a grandmother trying to convince people to follow them in the freaking bathroom, okay? she was pretty extreme. She wanted to see every moment, make sure I wasn't talking about her. I couldn't even go to therapy without her having some way of knowing what I was saying. So like I was effectively silenced on anything that she did. And then the things that I did talk about, I was very careful about. Because, you know, there was a point as a teenager I was so desensitized to some of it that I didn't even realize the level of details that I was even giving out, like how bad they actually were. That tells you something whenever people think that they're keeping secrets and then what they think that you shouldn't think anything of. That actually says a lot. You see it in other things too, like whenever Arizona, like the stuff that they're open about is still bad. So what about the stuff that they're not being open about? And there's a lot of it that happens behind closed doors. It's a nightmare. But the stuff that they don't see a problem with, that they don't even like bother covering up anymore, that they don't even bother lying about it, that's because they're so desensitized. And you see it with people who've been through abuse and stuff as well. But like I learned pretty quick that wasn't normal after I got out. It was all stuff that I figured out pretty quickly. Yeah, no, not actually normal. And you know how I figured that out? I talked to people. Yeah. I did the hardest thing I could think of. I talked to people and I asked them what normal was. I talked to a lot of people. There's actually, I mean, I knew all of them. Like, I wasn't going around talking to strangers. I know. But like they were people that I was just asking, what's normal? And some people they would be like, well, what's normal? And I would be like, no, I want to know what normal is to you. And a lot of people, they'll tell you. Like, you know, how did you grow up? I didn't have it normal, and I want to know how it's supposed to be. Help me pick out the things that I can't see, you know, sort of thing. And that's actually a big part of that. I was able to pick out some stuff. Other things I learned very quickly, if I didn't know already, to just keep my mouth shut. The thing of it is that the stuff that I opened my mouth about was still really bad. Like the abuses that happened whenever I was in state custody and all that. Like there was actually a point after what happened to me and my kids that I actually lied to a psychiatrist saying that I wasn't abused in state custody. Because just the whole way that he asked was just, it was like if I said yes, he it was just sort of a situation where it felt like I shouldn't say yes. I shouldn't talk about it with him. He wasn't good people. He wasn't going to react well. There are some situations that you run into like that, where if you talk about what has happened, they retaliate against you for talking about it. And I kind of recognize this guy a bit. So I was like, well, this is someone who does things to people, so he's not gonna like it if I talk about it. There's some people that you run into more than once. They see like hundreds, maybe even thousands of different people. They won't remember you. But I remember them. Maybe not their names. Some names I'll sort of get now. I'm not even used to, like, that. Even, like, after, like, over a decade, I'm not used to that. Like, I still kind of just knee-jerk reaction. Like, I don't even think about it. Or whenever I do, then it's a little weird because I spent so many years of my life just not. But you sort of recognize them. You get this feeling of familiarity. And if you go into the history that you can go to, you'll usually find a name. Most of my records are sealed or gone. Like, they just disappeared, and there's no explanation for why. Just either they were sealed or someone pulled them and they pulled the originals, which can actually happen. It's part of the reason. Okay, that's the only part of Obamacare I even agree with, is backing up the record so that isn't a thing. But also, it creates another level of this can still happen if someone does it computerized. So there are instances where this has happened, where people's records have been pulled and they pulled the originals, or they just destroyed a bunch of stuff. I went from having a record like thicker than my face to having one this big at one point. And I was like, what happened to the rest? And they're like, it's sealed. And I'm like, why? And they're like, I don't know. You're not 21. I was probably like 18, 19 whenever that happened. Just most of my records were just suddenly sealed and gone. It was after the attempt connected to the medications that kind of made me do that. I'd been telling them for a while that it was doing that. And yeah. Suddenly most of my records were just gone. I wasn't of the age yet, and it was supposed to be something, that I could choose at 21. Do I have my records sealed or don't I? That's what I was told. But it wasn't even when I turned 18 or anything like that. It wasn't any sort of milestone that they would normally do this. Just one day, some of my records are there and some of them weren't. And I went from having, like, books full of it to this much. And that's not normal. That's not normal. That's not your usual thing. That's something that happens if someone's doing something they're not supposed to. And, But you don't get to speak up. That's what I grew up with. You don't get to speak up because... Okay, so it's not as bad, but it still hurts like a bitch. But now I can move and laugh, and it doesn't make it worse. Okay, maybe the moving does. Depends on how I move. But I still have to be careful with it. I'll probably have to be careful for a few days. I won't know if, it felt worse or it is worse. I'll find out in a couple days, I guess. Within the next couple days. Fuck. I'm gonna have to ask Jean to transfer the laundry over to the dryer. I had laundry in the washer. It's only good for tumbling at this point, which takes like all day. Or all night. Or all night and then most of the morning. So. We're still fighting for that, by the way. Yeah. So, anyway, yeah, we've been fighting for that for like 2 months now. Going on, like, what? Oh, God. Maybe 3 months going on? Anyway, we've been fighting that for a while now. It seems like it's just been forever. They just don't want to give it up. And Jean was like, I'm never recommending this company to customers for this, ever. Because it's actually insurance. They're supposed to pay to replace it. If it's just normal wear and tear, just within a certain amount of time, because you're basically being guaranteed that this is going to work for a certain amount of time, and it didn't. And it wasn't anything that we did. It wasn't anything like that. You know, if it's normal wear and tear, or if it's damaged in shipping, they're supposed to do something about it, and they don't. They're not doing what they're supposed to. We cannot replace it until they do. We paid for this. You know, we didn't get a washer and dryer because we have a lot of money. We did it because we saved up for this. And that would be why we put in that, you know, that little extra from our savings, just in case. You know, in case something happened, or in case it didn't hold up like it was supposed to. We didn't want to be on the hook for something that, you know, was basically a faulty product. So we paid that little bit of extra, and that's what it's supposed to do. And they're not actually fulfilling it. They are not fulfilling their end of the bargain at all. So, yeah.
Anything else you need from me tonight?
I forgot to, there's a wash in the washer.
Go put it in the dryer.
You're getting the what?
Indiana Jones hat.
Oh, okay.
A fedora, I believe it's called.
Fedora, dear.
Fedora, yep. Yes. I almost tempted to name Puss in Boots.
Okay, now, you know what? You can talk about this and...
I'll be back.
And no worry. Oh, I've got them on a Tibbet, on a Catware binge. I played one, and now it's like, hey, wait, we can actually do cool stuff with this. This is an often overlooked race in 3.5. Anyway, the article that I was complaining about, I can't actually find it now. It was taken off of the D&D wiki site that I found it on. Yeah, we actually have the books and the Dragon Mags. So I was like, yeah, this isn't a thing. Like, these are actually two different versions of it, and at no point do they actually say that you can't be pale-skinned. And in the book, they actually have, like, the picture has pale skin and, like, green eyes. I think it's green. Might be gold. I actually have to go take a look. I'm thinking of my cat's eyes now. I'm really tired and in a lot of pain. I'm not in as much, though. I think I can function like this. So some ibuprofen and I can function while I'm healing. Again, I'm hoping that it's not as bad, that it was just initially, like, worse because of how, like, it happened. So wishful thinking, cross your fingers. Anyway, I completely forgot what I was talking about. Anyway, yeah. No, I didn't. No, but I had a completely screwed up history as far as, like, how I started things out. But I can remember a time, a very, very long time ago, that I was pretty normal. You know, I took cookies from the cookie plate, and I wasn't really fat or anything. You know, it was a Gerber baby, so it was kind of like, you could see the chub, but it was like normal. I was normal. I wasn't overweight. It was just normal for a kid. And it was baby fat. And, like, I wasn't really thick, you know, so it's just baby fat, you know, the sort of thing that, like, weirdos freak out about kids having, but is actually healthy. So I was healthy, and the worst thing I literally ever did, and it was pretty despicable actually, was I think I was in preschool. I took a cookie and I framed my brother for it. Not only did I frame him, I convinced him to let me smear cookie crumbs in the chocolate from the chocolate chip cookies on his face. My grandma was evil as fuck. But she made some great ass cookies. and we would always want them. I actually had to watch everyone else eat their cookies after dinner. I wasn't allowed to have any. I did kind of confess to it after I'd already, kind of framed my brother and he was in trouble. And then I felt bad. So I confessed. But it was pretty despicable. I mean, I put a decent amount of planning and thought into this. This was premeditated, and I was in preschool. And, I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I framed my little brother. After that, anytime something happened, my mom would always look at me. And, was I the mastermind? Because any of our pranks, anything that we co-opted, it was usually my idea. I mean, I was pretty normal. I mean, it wasn't anything harmful. Usually it was funny stuff, or funny to us. How we'd get mom to accidentally consent to us going out to hunt toads. Yeah. So there was that time that we talked to my mom. We were still pretty young. My brother and I were 1.5 years apart. So half the year we're 2 years apart, half the year we're 1 year apart. Whenever we were kids, this was really confusing. We would just tell people that we were 2 years apart because we didn't really understand the difference. And I would always get in more trouble because I was older. But we weren't that much older. So literally we were in the same age group. I wasn't really that much ahead of him as far as developmentally went. I hit the milestone before him, but not much before him. Because it's only 1.5 years. So we were pretty close. We shared a room. Whenever mom put us in separate rooms after she got us back because they demanded this, we had the room. She was paying the rent for the room, the extra rent to have 3 rooms instead of just 2. But the reality was my brother ended up bringing in pillows and blankets, and we would just end up in the same room. And whenever we weren't, we were arguing, in our sleep. I'm not the only one who sleep talks. My brother also. We would sleep talk, and we would do it to each other. We would carry on entire arguments and conversations that we would never remember. I actually found out that my ex-husband did this with his brother too, which I was kind of is this weird normal? I don't know. But also my brother, he would sleepwalk, and there was this time I tried to tell my grandparents because we were staying over there that night, and they didn't want to listen. Mom was at work. It was right after we moved out here. So mom was, it was maybe a week before mom got us our own apartment. Because almost as soon as she got out here, she had a job. Because, mom was awesome like that. I do not have that kind of charisma. So, yeah. Mom also had connections, though, that I don't have. And my grandfather's assistants. Something I've never had in that. Nobody's ever handed me anything, literally. So, yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, after that, my mom was able to sort of take off on her own on that. She formed her own connections and established herself and all that. So, anyway, while she was getting together the money for that first apartment, we spent a couple weeks or so with my grandparents, and we all stayed in the spare room that later was my room. Sort of. My grandmother couldn't seem to decide sometimes. whether I actually had my own space or not. Because most of my closet was storage for them. It didn't even really have all my stuff in it. I wasn't allowed to have that much stuff, actually. Yeah, let's not go into the details of that stuff and the diary reading and the different being punished, literally punished for even writing in my diary. Oh no, she didn't just sing to therapy. She didn't even want me to, like, write about it. Like, she didn't want anything that said anything about what she was doing. So, like, as sad as I was that she died, I was also really relieved. It was also, like, another burden, though, because it felt like she would never face what she did. And I would just have to do it by myself. Because I'd sort of held out hope that, like, eventually she would admit that the things that she did were wrong, and, you know, we could maybe move forward together and repair a relationship. Because as much as my grandmother absolutely failed to bond with me, I did not fail to bond with her. In fact, earlier on, it caused some issues because I was very bonded to my grandmother. The doctor actually told my mom to take me back with my grandmother whenever I was a baby because after she tried to remove me from that situation after my grandmother did something that caused me injury and could have done a lot worse, the doctor told her that she needed to have my grandmother watching me again instead of, I guess, my dad's parents or something? Or my stepdad's parents? I don't even know. The story changed over the years with my grandmother. I just know it was one of their parents. So, I don't remember it, obviously, because I was, like, an infant, maybe, like, 5-6 months old. And apparently, like, my health tanked because, you know, I was bonded to my grandmother. So, all those seizures that I eventually grew out of, I had some grand mal. And the doctor said that I'd been thriving and now I wasn't. So even though I was in an abusive situation with my grandmother, I was thriving. And my mom, she just wanted to get me out of there, and doing so literally almost killed me. I don't even want to imagine what my mom must have been thinking during that. I don't get to ask her. The only reason why I know that she was removing me from because of the stuff my grandmother was doing, that I even know that she was doing anything like that, is because my grandmother admitted that to me whenever I was like a teenager. Apparently, she decided that she was done with me. And Mom walked in on it. Yeah. She played it off like nothing that my mom did had a reason. The truth of the matter is that my grandmother had literally, periodically attempted to erase me from existence since before I was born, and that's actually how my twin sister died. Before we were born. My mom was great, and she was constantly, like, protecting us from that, while still trying to not, you know, cause health problems or anything, because whenever I was very little, I was also very fragile. And then whenever I was old enough, where kind of keeping us more separate, was okay and I didn't have the febrile seizures anymore or anything like that. You know, she just gotten to that point where she was comfortable saying, you know, that if we left, I wouldn't die. Because literally, my mom was constantly, like, scared. Because this had happened twice. Where she'd almost lost me. There were, like, they'd written out the death certificates. They didn't think that I was coming back. And then at the last minute, they were able to bring me back. Anyway. And I got really insanely lucky because I was in the window where you could have brain damage. And I didn't have it. The third time was the day that my dad died. And that was also the day of my last seizure. The shock and the injuries that I obtained that day were what caused me to go into that seizure. That one, I actually remember being sent back. My mom, they weren't trying to bring me back anymore. My mom literally punched out a nurse to get to me. Because they did not want to let her touch me. She was just like, you know. So, I guess from the beginning, I was in a world that didn't really want me to a mom that did. He sent me back. My dad. The same dad that died. That, like, same day. Almost. That same day. I don't really know how long I was there. But to me, the memory is the same day. And he was the one that sent me back. I don't know if it was exactly the same day, because I was pretty little, but I do remember that I was in the ambulance, and I still had that. I was still bleeding, and I was a little kid, so anyway, he was the one who sent me back. He said that mom needed me. Next thing I knew, I could hear her crying, and I could feel her tears, and then I was awake. And the nurses and the doctors were, like, freaking out, and they suddenly, like, there were hands everywhere, and they were testing things and touching me, and I just wanted to, like, them to just leave me alone. I just wanted my mom. And they were just wanted to, like, take me from my mom's arms to do stuff, and my mom wasn't letting go. And I wasn't letting go. I was just like, no, I want my mom. Like, yeah. I was, I think, like 3 or 4. No, I think it was, like, right before I turned 4. Somewhere in there. I'm never exactly clear exactly when it happened with my dad either. It was in that time frame, and it was this time frame where, I don't know, did my dad miss my 4th birthday because he was deployed? Or did he miss it because he just died and, like, my mind was still, like, kind of shutting it off? I don't know. But yeah. But even with that, I was kind of normal for a while. I mean, I had nightmares. I avoided a couple different things. I would sometimes space out, and I couldn't remember why. But I would always really want to cry. Later I learned that that was actually, like, the first instance of PTSD that I had. Except that I was really little and I couldn't, like, my mind was sort of almost protecting me from it. Later, that I didn't get that lucky. And also, you have to remember it eventually. And whenever you remember it, you also get to remember the flashbacks, which aren't all that coherent in, like, their order of things. Like, it actually took me years to put it in order, because I was very little, and this was pretty damn traumatizing. And it was just... Sometimes I would wake up crying and all I could remember was Red and screaming. Just red, wet, red blood, basically. But, like, without the word blood. Like, you know it is, but at the same time you don't. Like, it's sort of disconnected. It's really hard to explain this stuff. But, you know, after that I was still pretty normal. Like, a little smarter than most kids. Bit of a higher IQ. A little socially awkward. But also, you know, just kind of normal. I mean, I didn't always know what to do with other kids. Like, what do you do? But, like, whenever I was really little, I did normal things. I ate dirt. My grandmother never let me forget about this. Apparently, whenever I was, like, a baby, not even a year old, I was smearing poop on the walls. Like, I discovered that my diaper had something in it, and she didn't come to change it whenever I cried, so I decided to make with the art all over the walls. Apparently my uncle had done the same thing. And I was a teenager still hearing about this as, like, and it would always come back to something I did as, like, a toddler or something. That was the reason why she had some sort of role then. And I was like, but this was such and such years ago. I don't even remember this. Like, I was too little to know any better. Why do you have this rule whenever I know better? Like, all the other kids can do all these things. Why am I confined to this? Just because whenever I was, like, 2 years old, I played with the knockers on the, you know, china cabinet. Like, that sort of thing. Like, there were rules that were there because, specifically, whenever I was very, very little, I did things that very, very little children do. And to this day, I actually wonder if I was really the reason why those broke off. Like, how does a baby break off brass, like this thick, around, all the way around, brass knockers? I don't actually think that I was the one that broke those. I don't remember this. And apparently my grandmother was, like, the only one home whenever this actually happened. But, I don't know. To me, I think that something besides that had to happen, because an infant does not break that stuff off. They can't. They don't have the strength for this. You could, like, knock that thing, like, 1,000,000 times. That's not coming off. It's not just going to break, especially clean like that. I don't know. Color me, skeptic. But as an adult, like, I've actually, like, and having actually worked with metal and jewelry, making with my grandfather, I actually doubt that a baby could have done that. Like, I don't know, maybe my aunt did something and just didn't want to own up to it, or someone else did something and didn't want to own up to it, or my grandmother just went to hit me or throw something at me and that broke it off. Because yes, my grandmother did stuff like that. That was part of the reason why my mom was like, well, no. No. So, yeah. I mean, I try to think back, and lately I've been trying to think back on what were the good things. Like, I guess I was good at choir and art, and I volunteered to help any chance I got. Usually, my grandmother wouldn't let me, but whenever my mom was alive, she let me. And I guess my grandmother started to let me do some things after she got threatened. I don't know how many times. Because like they basically said she's too isolated. She literally does not know how to deal with other children. She is so isolated. She doesn't. You put her in a room with other kids, and they don't know what to make of her, and she doesn't know what to make of them. Like, this is how isolated I was. And the only kind of kids I knew how to take care of were little ones. Because even the school would just, like, if there was a bully, they would just remove me from the playground. Because, you know, I was the one that was different, so I guess it was my fault, right? And that was actually what some principals actually came to. If you were in any sort of special program or had any sort of diagnosis of any kind or disabled in any way, and something happened, you were the one taken off the playground. The other person wasn't really dealt with, even if, you know, you had like a bajillion witnesses. Like every kid on that playground could swear that it was them and not you, and you would still get taken off. Because they were just so biased in this. So it actually created a pattern doing this. Because, like, one person, you know that one person who's just a dick? And they just do this to everyone? Well, they figured out that they could get away with it whenever they did it to me. And other kids like me. So they would do this, and then other kids would catch on and they would join in. Because they thought, I can get away with this. They created the premise for what happened to us by allowing it to happen the first time. Monkey see, monkey do. So I was taken off the playground and I was tutoring preschoolers and kindergartners. Basically. I was free help for teaching assistant. That's literally what it was. I was just going in to help them. And there were times that I would just help the kid in the class the teacher didn't have time for. And that I think was part of the problem, because sometimes these kids, they were a lot like Chris, in that they got it, but, like, they didn't want to get it. Sometimes they just needed it re-explained. You know, like, there was this one kid that I was helping, he was in kindergarten, and nobody was helping him with his homework at home. And I had that same sort of situation at home, so, like, I felt for him. So every time I would come in, she'd have me work with him and catch him up, because he was behind. And, like, by the time we were done, you know, he was caught up. And I was telling the teacher, because she was saying that he was slow, and I said, he's not slow. I know, stupid. She's like, no, I'm not saying he's stupid, he's slow. I'm saying he's not slow. You know, but I was just a kid, so nobody was listening to me. Because, you know, he understood things. Like, the first time I got it, once he figured out what worked for him, he got it the first time. He wasn't slow. He just was an elephant trying to climb a tree. Just to use that analogy. Now, some of the stuff he actually understood the first time too, but then he didn't really want to understand it because he just wanted someone to sit down with him. That's all he wanted. He wanted and needed the attention that kids thrive on. That's it. And then you had, like, the kids who thought that, like, they were supposed to act like this. Because the way that it was treated was reinforcing it. And, like, no matter what I would say, I was just there. Nothing I said had any bearing. In fact, like, at one point I was told they can't even, like, officially, like, say that they're having kids help in the classroom. You know? Tutor younger children, And, you see a lot. And that's basically what I was doing instead of recess for most of elementary school. I didn't really do recess. Once I reached a certain point, it was pretty consistent that in every school I was in, if something started happening, they just moved me in there. They'd have me helping out the little kids, and I liked it, so it wasn't really bad to me. But sometimes I did want to just be at recess. But they gave me two choices: sit in the library and twiddle my thumbs, basically, after I'd read like every book in there, or go help out with the little kids. And that was it. I didn't have a go play on the playground option. And if I tried to do that, my bullies already knew that they could get away with it. I mean, they created that whole situation. And there were other kids who went through it, some of the boys especially. Like, they didn't really take them off the playground as much whenever it happened. But they would say to me, "You're so lucky, because you don't have to put up with it." And I would say, "But sometimes I really just want to play. I just want to roll down the hill or something. Roll in the grass. Or, I wish that they had swings. Because, whenever you pass, like, second grade, you go into third grade, no more swings. They just give you a field and say, go talk. Go entertain yourselves by socializing. But don't stand too close." Like, there's all these different rules that they give you, and all you're doing is just standing there. It's like they suddenly expect that you don't